Remember about that headspace, as they say. Do you know about the headspace?
Great app.
Yeah. Good call. Hi, and welcome to the Facebook Ads Kingdom. We tackle some of the biggest questions surrounding Facebook ads, e commerce businesses, entrepreneurship, products, and much more. And we also don't swear that much, which makes this thing a little bit kosher, as they say. I'm your host, Morty Rapp, and with me is my co host and my lovely boss, Azriel Rats, founder of Rats Pack Media. And today's topic is iOS 14.5, the great disaster. Azriel, I got a question for you. I want to know what the heck happened, what led us up to that point, and why was it so significant for everybody who's working in e-commerce advertising?
Okay, so let's rewind. All the way back to January. Let's even call earlier than that. Let's go back late 2019. So late 2019, before the days of COVID, before you even remember what your house looked like. Apple made an announcement which turned the entire advertising world upside down by announcing that they are going to give the keys of privacy over to the users. So it had always been possible on Android devices, on specific browsers, you could choose to opt out of tracking from advertisers. Even your basic ad blocking tools, stuff like that, those always existed. But this was the first time that basically Apple was saying to customers, not only do you get the choice if you want to opt in or not, but we will actively opt you out and you have to choose to opt in. So this was an announcement made maybe middle of the year 2019, and no one really knew what that meant. Everyone started freaking out long before. Facebook already back then removed 28-day targeting, tracking. They removed a lot of tools that had been available way before iOS 14.5 rolled out, with the understanding that this would be the new norm in the industry, that users would be opted out.
Let's pause for 1 second. Up until this point, you were saying every advertiser, from the moment that you fed them their first ad and they clicked on it, you could track everything they do from here on out?
Every user, every interaction. You could literally create a streamless, understanding of every opened email, the link clicks they went to, what videos they watched, every single thing, every touch point. Very simply, Google Analytics, would tell you time on site. You could literally watch the user move their mouse on their screen. Everything was known to the advertiser. And that was a big selling point for online ads in general, because you talk about a company that could choose to spend on billboards, TV, radio, versus online, where you're going to spend a bunch of money on TV. Then you don't know who's actually getting to the website. You don't know who's calling, who's coming into the stores. But here, there's a very one-to-one effect. You spend money on social or on Google, or Snapchat, then the person does some interaction. You can actually track, I spent $1, I made $5. That's much harder to do when you're running all these other platforms. You can't track exactly, the billboard showed this many people, but how do I know that led to an incremental increase in sales? This was the selling point of online advertising, was this ease of understanding of what's actually working.
Sounds like the golden era of online advertising. For sure.
Correct. And so everyone was sort of bracing for this impact of inevitable loss of everything. Like, you would be in the dark, it would be just as bad as TV, just as bad as radio. You wouldn't know what was working. And a lot of businesses, in reaction to that, just pulled out their budgets. Why would I be here if I could be somewhere else? Long before the ads even started, any issues even happened. So then, somewhere around the middle of April 2020, Apple announced this update, and the users could update. And at the time, nothing happened. We were all expecting this huge drop, and nothing happened. Why? Because it took about 6 weeks for users to actually update their operating system.
Right.
So from the time when it was released, it took about a month before people had it on their device. And then you actually have to use the app from the time that the person did the update to the time when they use the app, could be another couple of days. And then there would be a pop-up, and the pop-up would say, do you want this app to be tracking you, third-party data, allow or don't allow? And if you click away, it automatically opts you out. Again, this is automatically opting out all of the users. And so nothing happened for the first 6 weeks. Then all of a sudden, June of 2020, all of these advertisers are noticing a huge drop in results. Their ads, the spend's the same. Facebook's, collecting. When I went and I actually did the numbers, I did it for about 5 clients at the time. The drop in conversion rate was 42% compared to before, even though the levels of sales and revenue from the back end were the same. Meaning,
we're still producing revenue.
We're
still serving ads. We're still producing revenue. Well,
right. Facebook is under attributing by 42%.
That's a big number.
So for many brands, that was enough to say, we need to take a pause on this. Let's turn our ads off. And I'll tell you, I lost 3 or 4 clients at that time that were doing well.
Wow.
But because they couldn't come to their board and say, Facebook is telling us a 5, a 10, or whatever number X results,
right?
They turned their ads off. They could not. The thing that was the selling point for social ads was gone. So now, if I can't know for sure, then what should I do? Stop the ads. And I know of businesses that went out of business. Like literally, I had a client, they went out of business because they turned their ads off, and that was the thing. That was the blood.
That was the revenue driver. Without it, they have nothing
of it. And so, luckily, around the same time, many of these attribution platforms came out, not because of this issue, meaning they had already started before that point for whatever other reason. Back then, they weren't as needed. Like you had Google Analytics, it did the job. But with this new rollout, it became a very big problem with tracking, and users wanted a better understanding of what was actually happening. So these other attribution platforms came out, and what the shtick of what they were able to do versus what Facebook was doing was, so you understand, if I am a business, I own a website, and I want to go to Facebook and put the Facebook pixel on my website, that's what's called a third-party pixel. So Facebook owns the pixel. Facebook then owns the data. You put the Facebook pixel on your website, and when the user, who's your user that you paid to come to your site, comes to your site, the Facebook pixel fires. It then sends the data to Facebook for Facebook to hold the data. So you're not holding the data. Facebook owns the data. It's Facebook pixel. It's Facebook's everything. Because of that, it's what's called third-party pixel tracking. It's not your data. It's Facebook's data. So what they created over time was called first-party pixel tracking. These companies created a pixel that's 100% owned by you. You put this pixel on your website. All the data is being held in your database within their larger analytics platform. And then you're sending the data back to Facebook to match their data up. And so that got around the iOS update that was turning off third-party pixel data. So that's when a lot of these platforms came around. And that's the thing they changed, was their ability to basically say, okay, Facebook can no longer track this data, but if we create for you a tracker, you'll be able to track the data.
There has to be a but, though.
There's got to be a but. The but is that Facebook's whole thing is that they want to say that they got you a good return, so you keep putting money into their system. So they built a tool called smart modeling. So they said, they actually got rid of their attribution platform. They basically said, with this third-party tracking issue, we can't create a first-party pixel for everyone. We're turning it off. They got rid of a lot of tools, like internal tools that were really great. If anyone remembers, there used to be a thing called Audience Insights, which to me was like one of the greatest tools Facebook ever had. You create a custom audience of your email list or your Facebook page likes. You upload it into the Audience Insights, and it literally tells you the pages these people follow,
oh, amazing,
the device they use, the platforms they're using, like, oh, they're using Facebook more than Instagram, oh, they're using desktop more than mobile, oh, here are the 20 top pages that overlap with your pages. Like, it was such an amazing tool. They removed it when this iOS update happened, they had an analytics tool that was like a competitor with Google that they got rid of. So they basically rolled out what's called smart modeling, which basically said, we don't know what's happening on Shopify. We don't know what's happening on WooCommerce. We don't know what's happening on your Unbounce page or your ClickFunnels or your Go High Level, whatever that is. But we have a ton of data. So if you connect your API and you connect your Facebook pixel and you let us run ads and we have, all these integrations with all these tools, we can get a pretty good idea of what sales are actually happening on Facebook. Give us 72 hours to sort of collect and, dissect the data, and we'll give you a better data point than what you're getting now, which is a 42% drop in attributed conversions.
So Facebook knows that their value, or I should say the value of the tracking of ads went down basically to zero, and they had to fix it. But they got rid of some tools that were still valuable to advertisers. And they have this kind of it sounds like almost like a Frankenstein workaround between this and other people who are creating technologies that fit within the ecosystem. And you as the advertiser yourself and the brand is still left somewhat in the dark.
So amazingly, they're now, to me, when you actually look at the data and you do the same sort of Excel spreadsheets we did back in 2020, they're within a range of about 5 to 10% accuracy. For these.
And in the industry, is that okay?
So the answer is it depends. Meaning, if you were used to seeing in your back end, and you have to remember, this happened at the same time as COVID, right? So back during COVID times, all of a sudden, every user on earth went from buying at a store, from going out, to sitting in their house and scrolling on social media. So I had clients back then that were getting a 11 to 15 times return on ad spend. So you have a company that's used to seeing a number 10 in the back end. And all of a sudden overnight in June of 2020, right as you're seeing these huge numbers happening, it's going down to a 6. And you're going wait, what's going on? Right. Then you find out, well, it's this discrepancy that's happening, that the 42% drop. So really, the 6 really means a 12. You're actually doing better than you thought. You were used to 10, now it's really 12.
But you can't prove it. But you, as the advertiser, can't prove it. No.
Also, you're this Frankenstein thing between Excel spreadsheets or using one of these attribution tools, or what's called MER, which is this monthly expense ratio. It's this new tool, the number that a lot of advertisers use. Basically, we look at all the money we spend between all of our advertising: Google, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, even email marketing, SMS. That's how much money we're putting into ads. Compare that number to the total revenue, and we have what they call MER, M-E-R, is this ratio of, for every dollar we put in, we expect this 2, 3, 5x. Can we measure what's working? There's this joke: 50% of your marketing works, you just don't know which 50%. So that's the joke. That's the joke in the industry, is we know when we spend this amount of money in each of these places, we make a number altogether.
Right.
All the money in, all the money out, other way around. All the money out, all the money in. We know if we're putting $1, we're making 3. Okay, we're happy with that number. Well, what's actually working? We don't really know. Let's just keep it. And I don't like that. I'm a data guy. I have a degree in math. I'm not in love with that idea. But that's what a lot of advertisers shifted to. They said, forget about looking at the ROAS. Forget about looking at dollar for dollar. You're just going to say you're going to budget this amount. We're going to put it into these different places, and we're going to play around. Maybe take 10, 15, 20% of the budget, put it in different places, and see how it affects your MER. That's what you're looking to do. I don't like that so much. But also businesses aren't in love with that. So now again, you went from seeing your 10, 15 to seeing a 6. 6 really meant to 12, but you don't really know. So now they introduced the smart modeling. They removed 28-day tracking. They removed all these other things. So now the number you're looking at today is totally different than the number you look at, but they call it ROAS, meaning they still call it return on ad spend. So a company that was used to looking at a number that said 12, 15, 9, whatever, you're looking at your back end, it says 5. And you're like, wait, where's my money? What's happening? So it's a very frustrating experience. And it's understandable. You sold your company, as the marketing team, you sold your company. We should be spending money in these places. Look at what is printing us this money. And now it's not.
Right.
And now you can't even confirm what is and what isn't. And Facebook's off by 10 to, 5 to 10%. So we kind of want to use these tools, but there's a caveat to the whole thing. The only reason it works is because Facebook is directly plugged into many of these platforms. They're connected to Shopify and WooCommerce and Magento. But you imagine there are these companies that exist that aren't on Shopify. As crazy as it sounds, there is quite a large ecosystem that I've met of brands that are not 7, not 8, 9 to 10 figure brands making $100 million to $1 billion that said we can't be, for whatever reason it was, we can't be on Shopify, we can't be on WooCommerce, we can't be whatever. Let us build our own platform. So they're built on their own custom developed website, which they can afford because they make $100 million a year. They can afford to build such a platform.
Correct.
The problem is that Facebook doesn't have smart modeling for 5,000 other stores like your store. So now Facebook is basically in the dark. Whatever setup you have is not going to be nearly as good as the connection that Facebook has with Shopify and WooCommerce and Magento and BigCommerce and Salesforce, because these are billion-dollar industries with thousands.
Those have to be MER companies only. There's nothing else that they could do.
Right. So these companies come to me and say, listen, Facebook tells me I'm getting 20,000 clicks to my website. I'm making millions of dollars from Facebook, which I'm making, meaning the money's coming in because these are enormous companies making tons of money. But when I actually go and look at my Google Analytics, or I look at my whatever tool, which many of these big attribution companies didn't build for custom built sites. So they don't have the opportunity to use these out of the box, custom, like pre-built attribution platforms. We're talking about either you use a free tool that you just have your development team set up through Google Tag Manager, or you're paying $30,000 to $80,000 a year for some out of the box custom tool to track.
Crazy. Yep.
So that you could get a better idea, because Facebook's telling you made $1 million and Google's telling you made $15. And so the reason that they're so far off is because you're built on this totally custom platform, and no one has the data pools to compare your site to 100 other websites. It's just not possible. It's built on a different infrastructure.
I have two questions now.
Yes.
Question number one, before we continue, I think this is important. How many users are still using Android? And why obviously the iOS is a big one and a lot of people are using it, and that makes a lot of sense, but there's still another, can I assume 50% of other users are not stuck on iOS? Like, wouldn't that give us some degree of information?
So the answer is that Android released a similar tool already before, meaning users on iOS, on Android devices, potentially would have had the opportunity to opt out even earlier than iOS. But it was an active opt-out versus the Android that was opt-in, right?
Right.
Since Apple released theirs, Android also released theirs. On top of that, we're now talking about potentially a whole nother conversation of sites removing cookie tracking, meaning what's allowing Facebook to track a user for 5 to 7 days. A user clicks on your website, a bunch of cookies load, including your Facebook pixel. It saves that cookie data on that person for up to 7 days. Right. The user comes back 5 days later and buys. That cookie that they were holding is what tells Facebook that the purchase event happened. Right. But Google Chrome has announced that they're planning to basically delete cookies within a day. So what happens to all that tracking? It's going to happen again, the same exact thing. But Facebook knows, meaning this isn't a secret that's happening. So it's essentially where the industry went. Once Apple announced it, it went from the place of assumed opt-in to assumed opt-out. Yep. Just the data point that one of my clients got was 87% of their iOS users opted out of tracking. So that means that specifically for a company that was making, let's call it $25 to $75 million a year, they had over 85% of their iOS users were opted out of tracking, but they knew that 97% of their users were iOS users. Right. So we're talking about like in like essentially a period of June 15th to July 15th, when this really happened, of 2020, overnight, 80% of their data was wiped clean. Facebook had to figure it out. So Facebook worked very closely with these big platforms to develop something.
Right.
And now we are essentially going into a world in, let's call it months, not years, or weeks, not months, where the average person on the internet will be opted out of tracking. The Facebook pixel will not be able to track on its own. So that's why we have to use what's called CAPI, which is the conversions API setup, where you set up basically like a call. When an event happens on your website, send that first party data of my website to Facebook. Let Facebook match that data up with their Facebook pixel using smart modeling to come up with an answer. Again, Facebook tells you up to 72 hours to get that data point.
Right.
So we now have to live in a world where essentially we have to run ads for 2-3 weeks. We have to look back only on the data 7 to 10. And I hate looking at data for a day or two. It doesn't help anyone. Look at data for 7 to 10 days of data. Let that, the right word is like propagation of data get into the system to be able to model appropriately. And as time goes on, we're only going to be more in the dark as far as proper tracking. The hope is that with these new AI tools that Facebook's spending like $1 bajillion on, that we could get a decent idea of what's happening day to day for a platform that is as much in the box as possible. They're on Shopify. They have CAPI set up. All the proper pixel tracking is set up. And then potentially they then be using this third-party tool like a Northbeam or a Triple Whale or whatever other platform that's an out-of-the-box solution for a Shopify or a Magento business to then back up the data they're getting from Facebook's ad platform.
So it seems to me that the, I guess what the golden age or what the real value of the social media advertising at that time was data. And now it's obviously still an element of it, but there has to be a shift in terms of everybody who works in the media buying space.
Yeah.
And where do you think that shift has manifested? Meaning, what have you seen in terms of trends, in terms of the way people advertise, in terms of the way you interact with your clients? Like, how have people changed their businesses to react to this?
Yeah.
And how have you as a business leader adapted to it?
So the first thing is that what I will say is 100% not true is that people have left social ads. It's very clear that Facebook's making more money than ever. I don't have the data in front of me, but just cost per impression is up in a very big way, meaning they're getting paid. There are more advertisers advertising on platforms like Facebook than ever before. So that's for sure happening. Businesses are not pulling back on spend. They're putting more into spend, and more businesses are spending than we're spending. That's number one. Number two is you can't sit around as a business and be focused on one platform. Now, coming from the guy that does one platform, doesn't sound so great, but as a business, if you rely just on one platform, you now see just how fragile that experience is. You relied on just Google. You relied just on Facebook. You relied just on Snapchat. And there's so many potential things that are out of your control.
Yeah.
That are totally out of your control. And for you to continue relying on that one platform and saying, I'm only going to be on Facebook. I'm only going to be on email. I'm only going to be on this. The potential of the downside is enormous. So it becomes more important for a company to be able to be flexible enough to say, I'm going to be on other platforms. I'm going to spend substantially on those platforms. I'm going to pay more consultants and people to understand the landscape of those platforms. But I'm also potentially going to look at ads in a slightly different way than we looked at them from 2018 to 2020. So people talk about TikTok ads, which I'm not an expert in. I'm not an expert in TikTok ads, but people talked in 2021 that TikTok was Facebook of 2016. And the idea behind it was the pricing, the costs of TikTok were similar to that of Facebook in 2016. And therefore, you should go and put all your money into TikTok instead of Facebook. And what happened to all those companies? They're out of business. All those agencies that dropped running social, Facebook and Instagram ads, they went super heavy into TikTok. They're essentially, what happened was that Black Friday 2021, they realized it's not as simple as it sounds. TikTok isn't Facebook 2016.
Right.
It was much more similar to Facebook 2013. The difference was, which many businesses don't remember because they didn't exist in 2013-14, you could not expect a user on Facebook before there was an Instagram. You could not expect a user to see an ad, trust you, click on the link, buy the product, get the product, be super happy, and come back and buy again. That was not a user experience of 2013, 2014. If you wanted a user to come and buy from your store, you had to come with content. This was the heyday of like online publishers, those 27 reasons, or you should go to Italy. Like all of those sites, the reason they existed was because you had to build this level of trust
Right.
with the user. So they never heard of your brand before. You're not going to come and try to sell them a shirt and a dress on day one. You're going to sell them an email newsletter. You're going to sell them 10 fashion trends to look out for, 10 skincare routines, da-da-da-da. You're going to come in with this you literally probably had at that time a team of people making content. Like that was the name of the game in 2013, 14, 15. You came in with content. The ads were content to get users to stop. You had email, potentially. I even remember I had a client that was literally like, they gated the piece of content with an email. So you would come 13 Halloween ideas to use on your porch, right? And then in order to read the article, there was a pop-up, and you could not just get to the article. You had to first put your email address in just to read an article, not even an ebook, not a percentage off, not just to get to read the text on the landing page you came for. You had to give your email address. What they then did with the email was send daily emails, send promotional emails once or twice a week on top of the daily emails to create that level of trust for users so that at some point down the line, I could try to actually sell to them. That's what Facebook looked like in 2013, 14, 15. That's how I started. Like that when I started Facebook ads, you couldn't actually ask for a sale on day one. It wasn't a thing that could happen. It was only after, I think we even discussed this at a previous podcast. It was the invention of like growth of Amazon, which was way before 2013, 14. But like the growth of Amazon, that was this one-click purchase, these super like this creation of what was already trustworthiness in online stores. The idea that the user is not just going to like lose their credit card from buying from some random store. I would also say Shopify helped. Like the creation of Shopify, Magento, and WooCommerce meant that I'm coming to a website. I'm not just using some random backend. I have no idea what they're doing with my credit card number. How do I trust them?
Right.
So now there's this level of ease that exists with the client, with the customer. And so now 2018, 19, 20, you could actually run cold targeting ads to users and expect to get sales, which was something that could not happen in 2014, 13, 12.
And nowadays when people are running ads, is that what they're expecting?
So nowadays, no one wants to go back to that. No one wants to go and run these long. They don't have the infrastructure for it. You don't have content teams like you used to have. You don't have blog writing like you used to have. Like these things don't exist. Like if you do, it's like some guy with AI typing in, give me 10 blog ideas, and you're posting it with like no proofreading or anything. But that's what TikTok looked like, right? Like you went into the back end of your TikTok. If you were lucky, you spent $50,000 for like 4 add to carts. Well, then what actually happened? Oh, they searched you on Google. They joined your email list. They read, they got like their friends to tell them about the client. It was this long process. It looked different than what it looked back in 2013, 14, but it was the same idea. Like they don't click on the ad. They search you on Google. Why? Because if I want to buy the product, I want to know I'm getting it from the real store. How do I know from TikTok I'm actually seeing the real authentic person? Right? So they're going to search like the name of the product that they saw in the ad or the name of the business that's being represented. So they know they're actually getting to the authentic website. And then they might not buy it from you directly. They'll buy it from Amazon. And so like there's this much longer timeline on TikTok that existed back in not even so long, 2021, 2022, 2023. Now, at this point, with TikTok Shops, which rolled out, which allowed users to buy. Now, again, TikTok spent $5 billion. They allocate $5 billion of TikTok money to essentially convince users to buy products directly from TikTok. And so this allowed users to feel more comfortable to buy with TikTok directly, that they're going to see a
Because
product, maybe an
TikTok says
influencer will be
I'm
promoting a
protecting
product.
you, don't worry.
Say again?
Basically, because TikTok as a platform saying I'm
Was
protecting
not working. Was not working because
you. Yeah,
you needed these 17 touch points before the user felt comfortable to buy. But
right,
they invested in the tools necessary to convince the user we're going to be behind the purchase, just like Facebook is. Like as the advertisers, you might not, as the business, you might not know. A person buys from your store, Facebook sends them a survey. It doesn't happen all the time, but there is
yeah,
this rating that stores have. You only find it when you have a negative rating. Like I've
right,
seen before, I worked with some drop shippers back in the day, and they took like a month to ship, and somehow they had a very negative rating. Why? Because their users were asked by Facebook, "Did you receive the product? Was it what you expected?" And so Facebook's taking these reviews, and then they're affecting your pricing. Like literally, ad accounts were disabled from businesses that took too long to ship their product.
right,
So it's this very same. It's the very same thing that now TikTok is doing and saying, we're standing behind the customer. We're making sure the customer is getting the experience they want. We're making sure that any dispute that they're getting their money back. We're making sure that a business says, we're going to ship this thing. We're actually going to ship this thing. Like they're going to actually ship it. It's going to come in a timely manner. It's not going to be like, I don't know if you've seen these things, like these jokes like you buy from like Alibaba. And it's like, you bought a desk and it's like a little like origami, like 1 inch, like desk. It's like a desk to put on your desk. And so like all these jokes, like you bought a shirt and it's like for like a doll, right? So like you have to know when you buy from these websites, you're getting the real authentic thing. The
right,
platform had to spend real money to develop that opportunity for customers to feel comfortable. They've now really worked hard on that. It took them the same 4 or 5 years it took Facebook to do it. And
right.
only now are users really prepared to buy directly on TikTok. But guess what happened in all those years? The CPMs went up, the costs went up, the targeting, all those things that were the heyday of Facebook in 2016, 17, 18. Now it's looking the same. Like it's the same issues you're having then. So that's essentially what's happened over the years, where iOS rolled out, Facebook and other attribution companies stepped up in order to track properly. They can only do as good of a job as possible based on the data you're allowing them to get using their smart modeling based on the platform you're built on. And then you as the business have to realize, like, one, I might be somewhere in the middle between a direct first ad impression purchase event with ads, to a 7-day 25 email like funnel thing that I had to set up back in 2013, 14 in order to get sales. Do I think we're in either of those places? I think we're somewhere in the middle of those places. And I think that it does require more content. It does require more good quality video, reels, TikTok, social posts, UGC, influencer marketing. It does need this broader range of ad types, of longer funnels, of somewhere between a ROAS strict and a MER strict approach to advertising, and the understanding that, you don't own anything on the internet. Even emails these days, Google roll out all these new spam filters. Even people with big giant email lists, they don't reach the same people they used to. And you have to be willing to pivot and test and try new things all the time and have a budget for the new things, because you're living on rented land, no matter where you are, even in your email inbox.
It's a wild thing. Do you think maybe this will be our last question for the pod? Do you think let me rephrase the question. How do you perceive your value in the ecosystem now?
So it's more important than ever to understand the full funnel. If you're an advertiser that's just sitting in the ad platform and looking at ads and going, let me tweak this, which again is a necessary step. Who am I targeting? What ads should I be testing? How much new creative do I need? That's necessary. But the overall arching understanding of the internet as a whole, what new things can the client be testing to give that consulting is more important than ever, and a very large part of what I do, so that they're still getting a result they're happy with at the spend they're happy with, even if it has something more to do with optimizing the landing pages, coming up with better offers, which we had a whole podcast on, right?
Right.
That part is more important than ever. If anything, it's easier to find someone on Fiverr, on Upwork, on all of these websites where you could pay for talent in Latin America or the Philippines, to find someone that could do the clicking of the buttons in the ad platform. But the thing that's going to be important is understanding the entire ecosystem and being able to say, you need to fix your average cart. You need to fix your landing page. You need to fix your conversion. You need to look at the whole picture and say, okay, you're sending all this traffic. People aren't converting. Why? What can we test here? And that is a more important job than before, because it was much easier to get a sale on the first impression, first click, and track everything. Now we're in the dark. So when you be able to say, we're spending all this money, the business is spending all this money, it's an important thing to make sure that your client's not wasting money. You're not just saying, oh, you spent $100,000, oh, you made a 5 MER, like you got a good enough MER to be happy with it. But to say, how do I approach the issues that exist now in the ecosystem, exist now for my clients, and get them the best results possible at each step along the way, more than just turning a Facebook ad on or off.
Human intelligence has filled a gap where the shadow of iOS 14.5 created.
Absolutely.
I think that's an incredible value, to be honest. As a matter of fact, it's the only value, I mean, not the only value, but like that is the value nowadays for anyone working in this space.
Yes.
Very cool. Okay, well, good luck to everybody in the space. Azriel, you're a rock star as always. Any final message to anyone out there? To all the great e-com brands, and we're coming after you.
We're coming.
We're coming. Hold on to your knickers. All right, that is pod number 5. Number 5. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Oh, it didn't click. It didn't end. There it is.